Ladies and gentlemen, let's get brutally honest. You want him to come back, but your actions are pushing him further away. You're stuck in a cycle, texting when you're hurting, checking his social media hoping for signs, replaying conversations in your mind, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. But let me tell you something, every second you stay stuck in this behavior, you lose a piece of your power. And if you truly want a man to come back, it's time to do something radical. It's time to stop doing what's breaking you down and start doing what builds you up. We live in a world where we're told to fight for love. But real love doesn't need to be chased. It needs to be respected, and respect starts with you. If you want him to feel your absence, to realize your worth, to rethink everything, then you've got to stop trying to convince him. You've got to stop proving your worth and start living like you already know it. Because the moment you stop acting out of fear and start moving from power, something shifts, not just in him, but in you. That shift is what makes everything change. This isn't about pretending, it's about transforming. It's about drawing a line in the sand and saying, I will not keep breaking myself for someone who isn't showing up. The version of you that begs, overgives, overexplains, that version has to go, and the one that knows her value, protects her peace, and walks in purpose. That's who he'll remember, that's who he'll miss, that's who he'll come back for, but only if you stop doing what's keeping you in emotional survival mode and start choosing what heals and empowers you. When you stop chasing and start creating space, you shift the entire emotional dynamic, not just with him, but within yourself. Chasing comes from a place of fear, fear of loss, fear of being forgotten, fear that if you don't keep trying, he won't come back. But fear is not love, and fear doesn't attract, it repels. When you're constantly reaching out, checking in, asking how he feels, or trying to stay on his radar, what you're actually doing is telling him that he's in control of your emotional state. You're giving him the power to decide your value, your peace, and your sense of self-worth, and that's not attractive, that's exhausting. Creating space doesn't mean giving someone the silent treatment to punish them. It means pulling your energy back so you can return to yourself. Because when you chase, you lose your center. You're no longer rooted. You're reacting, not responding. You're waiting for him to do something to make you feel okay again. But when you create space, you give both him and yourself room to breathe, to reflect, to feel the weight of what's missing. You allow absence to do its powerful work. Because the truth is, people can't feel your absence if you never leave. They can't miss you if you're always there, emotionally or physically trying to stay close. And here's what happens when you create that space. The energy between you two starts to shift. When you're no longer flooding the dynamic with calls, texts, emotional check-ins, or trying to fix what he's not even acknowledging, something opens up. He's left with silence, and silence is powerful. It forces a man to sit with himself, with the consequences of his choices, with the void your absence creates. And while you're quiet on the outside, something even more powerful is happening on the inside. You're reclaiming your emotional energy. You're using the space not to wait, but to rebuild. Not to watch him, but to watch yourself grow. In that space, you rediscover who you were before the anxiety took over. Before the fear of losing him had you living in your head, before you confused love with self-sacrifice, and as you do, your energy changes. You stop asking, will he come back, and start asking, what am I returning to in me? That self-inquiry creates transformation. And transformation doesn't go unnoticed. He'll feel it. He'll feel that the version of you that once clung is gone, that she's been replaced by someone who no longer needs to chase, because she's too focused on healing, evolving, and rising. Creating space is not passive, it's powerful. It's not the absence of action, it's the presence of self-respect. It's the moment you stop trying to hold someone close and start holding yourself closer. And when you do that, you become magnetic, not by force, but by frequency. The more you honor your space, the more someone has to rise to meet you there, or lose you completely, and that's when the shift truly begins. When you stop justifying his behavior, you reclaim the clarity you've been avoiding. Deep down, you already know what's acceptable and what's not. You feel it in your gut when he disrespects your time, your effort, or your emotions. But instead of standing firm in that truth, you find ways to soften it. Maybe he's just busy. He's been through a lot. He said he didn't mean it like that. You build stories to protect your hope, not your heart. You start minimizing red flags because the idea of losing him feels heavier than the weight of disrespect. But here's the truth. Every time you justify what hurts you, you send a message to yourself and to him that your boundaries are flexible and your standards negotiable. The reason this is so dangerous is that it slowly chips away at your self-respect. You think you're being patient, understanding, loyal, but what you're actually doing is betraying your own intuition. You're teaching him that you'll stay even when he doesn't show up, that you'll continue to pour in even when he's inconsistent, that you'll tolerate being second, confused, or even mistreated, as long as you can convince yourself there's still hope. And when someone sees that you'll keep justifying their poor behavior, they stop trying to change it. Why would they, if there are no consequences? When you justify his behavior, you abandon your truth. You start living in his potential instead of his patterns. You hold on to the version of him you wish he was instead of seeing who he consistently shows you he is. But potential doesn't build relationships. Patterns do. And until you stop making excuses for the broken pieces he refuses to fix, you'll stay stuck trying to glue yourself back together after each disappointment. You'll feel like you're not enough when really, you've just been giving too much to someone who gives too little. The moment you stop justifying is the moment you start seeing clearly. You stop accepting confusion as love. You stop explaining away the late replies, the canceled plans, the mixed signals. You stop telling your friends he's just bad at communication. And start asking yourself, why am I okay with this? And that question changes everything, because when you stop justifying, you finally get honest, and honesty is what leads to freedom. This shift isn't about anger, it's about awakening. It's about no longer protecting someone else's comfort at the cost of your own clarity. It's about holding someone accountable, not to hurt them, but to heal you, because the more you justify his behavior, the more you invalidate your own feelings. But when you stop, you take your power back. You send a clear message: I don't need you to be perfect, but I won't shrink myself to make your imperfections acceptable. That's when everything changes. Not just in him, but in you. When you stop texting him just to check in, you begin to reclaim your voice, your dignity, and your power. Those little messages that seem harmless, hey, just wondering how you're doing, or hope your day is going well, they often come from a place of unspoken fear. Fear that he'll forget you. Fear that if you don't show up, he'll move on. Fear that silence means it's over. But the truth is, every time you reach out just to remind him you exist, you quietly tell him he doesn't need to work to keep your presence in his life. You're already there, giving, hoping, waiting, without him lifting a finger. This need to stay connected, even when he's giving you very little in return, is not love. It's survival mode. It's your nervous system trying to create safety in uncertainty. But those messages that come from anxiety rather than confidence only feed the imbalance in the relationship. He doesn't feel compelled to chase, to wonder, or to reflect, because you're filling all the silence he's leaving behind. You're doing all the emotional work. You're reaching across the distance every time it grows wider, until you realize you're the only one doing it. What makes this behavior especially draining is that it often leads to more confusion. When he responds vaguely, slowly, or with no real interest, it makes you question yourself. Did I say too much? Maybe he's just busy. Should I try again tomorrow? And suddenly, you're no longer engaging from a place of self-respect, but from insecurity. You're trying to decode crumbs, hoping they'll lead to something meaningful, but they rarely do, because real connection doesn't have to be begged for. It's mutual, it's balanced, it doesn't leave you anxious and unsure after every interaction. The moment you stop sending those texts is the moment you make room for clarity. You allow space for his effort to surface, or not. You get to observe, not assume. You get to see what he does when you're no longer filling the gap. Does he reach out? Does he ask how you are? Does he notice your absence? Because if someone truly values you, they will. If they don't, your silence only reveals what your messages were trying to cover up all along. That realization may hurt, but it will also set you free, and during that silence, something else happens. You begin to return to yourself. You stop refreshing the screen and start refreshing your soul. You start giving the attention you were offering him back to your own healing, your own goals, your own inner peace. You remember that you don't need to send a text to prove you care, that love isn't measured by how available you make yourself, it's measured by how deeply you honor your boundaries. And when you do that, you don't just protect your heart, you elevate it. That elevation, that's what changes everything. When you stop making excuses for red flags, you finally step into the truth you've been trying to avoid. Red flags are not subtle, they're patterns, they're gut punches, they're moments of silence that scream louder than words. But when you're emotionally attached, when you're hoping for a different outcome, it's tempting to explain them away. He's just stressed. He doesn't mean it like that. It's probably just a phase. You rationalize the inconsistency, the lack of effort, the disrespect, because facing the truth would mean facing the pain. But the cost of making excuses is far greater than the sting of being honest. It costs you your peace, your dignity, and your emotional safety. Each time you excuse a red flag, you abandon yourself. You ignore that inner voice whispering, "This isn't right." You put your hope in his potential instead of accepting his behavior, but you can't build a healthy relationship on excuses. You can't rewrite someone's actions with intentions they never showed. What you allow continues. So, when you let red flags slide, you're not just tolerating the behavior. You're inviting it to stay. And what starts as occasional disrespect turns into a pattern of disregard. Soon, you're living in emotional chaos, constantly trying to convince yourself that it's not that bad when deep down you know it is. Recognizing red flags doesn't mean you're judgmental, it means you're self-aware. It means you've grown enough to say, that behavior doesn't align with what I deserve. And that's not bitterness, that's self-respect. But the challenge is, red flags rarely show up as deal breakers in the beginning. They show up as discomfort, as subtle shifts, as inconsistent effort, as a tone in his voice that feels off. And if you've been conditioned to chase love, to prove your worth, or to avoid being alone, you'll be tempted to look away. But ignoring discomfort doesn't make it disappear, it makes it grow. When you stop making excuses for red flags, you stop negotiating with your non-negotiables. You no longer allow charm to cancel out bad behavior. You no longer confuse chemistry with compatibility. You realize that love without safety is not love, it's survival, and you deserve more than that. You deserve someone who doesn't make you question your value or feel like you're walking on emotional eggshells. You deserve someone who brings you peace, not anxiety dressed as passion. So every time you see a red flag, honor it. Don't dress it in reason. Don't silence your instincts. Sit with it. Ask yourself, if my best friend were in this situation, would I tell her to stay? Often, the answer is clear. You've just been too close to see it. But the moment you stop making excuses, everything shifts, because clarity is power, and the more clearly you see what doesn't serve you, the closer you move toward what truly does. When you stop living in your head and start living in your purpose, you break the cycle of obsession and step into a life that's actually yours. Obsessing over him, what he's doing, why he pulled away, whether he'll come back, becomes a mental trap. You play the same conversations on loop, replay his words, overanalyze his actions, and hang your peace on his next move. And what does it do? It drains your energy, robs your time, and slowly erases the parts of you that existed before him. You become a version of yourself that revolves around someone else's presence or absence. But the truth is, you were not put here to orbit around another person. You were put here to rise in your own light. Purpose breaks the obsession because it redirects your energy from what is he thinking to what am I creating. The moment you reconnect with your dreams, your goals, and your vision, you begin to reclaim your identity. You remember what lights you up that has nothing to do with him. You start pouring that attention into your physical health, your passions, your creativity, your business, your growth. You shift from wondering whether he still thinks about you to building a life you can't stop thinking about. That shift is powerful. It's not forced detachment, it's organic freedom. Living in your head creates anxiety. Living in your purpose creates momentum, because your mind can only obsess when it's idle, unoccupied, and emotionally starved. But when you start showing up for yourself, for your future, and for your mission, things change. You go from waking up hoping for a message to waking up excited about your next move. You start realizing that your story was never meant to pause for someone to catch up. It was meant to evolve with or without them, and that evolution, it's not just healing, it's magnetic. Men notice this change, they sense the difference in your energy. You're not posting stories to get his attention anymore. You're not subtly liking his posts to stay visible. You're simply busy living, and that absence of emotional dependency doesn't make you cold. It makes you captivating. You're no longer broadcasting, "Please see me." You're sending a silent, strong signal that says, "I see myself," and that's enough. That's the kind of energy that draws people in, not because you're chasing them, but because you're chasing purpose. So the next time your mind starts spiraling, catch it, interrupt it, ask yourself, what can I create right now instead of consume? Your future doesn't wait for a text back. It waits for you to show up, and the more you immerse yourself in your purpose, the more you release the need to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself, and once you start living from that place, the obsession dissolves and the right people align naturally. When you stop begging for love and start becoming the version of you that love can't ignore, everything about your energy shifts. Begging doesn't always look like pleading with words. It can be subtle. It looks like chasing, over-explaining, accepting less than you deserve, waiting by the phone, lowering your standards just to keep someone close. It's not always loud, but it's always painful. Because deep down, when you beg for love, you're saying, "I don't believe I'm enough without this person." That belief becomes the foundation of your choices, and suddenly, you're no longer leading your life. You're just reacting to theirs. But when you stop seeking love from a place of emptiness and begin building yourself from a place of strength, the dynamic changes. You stop asking, "How do I get him to love me again?" and start asking, "What kind of woman do I want to be, regardless of who stays or leaves?" That is a powerful question, because the truth is, the most attractive energy on earth is self-assuredness. It's someone who walks like they already know they're valuable, someone who doesn't try to prove their worth, but simply embodies it. That energy doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it draws in what aligns and filters out what doesn't. Becoming the version of you that love can't ignore means committing to your evolution. It means healing your wounds so you're no longer driven by them. It means setting standards and keeping them, not to test others, but to protect your peace. It means building a life so rich, so full of depth and purpose, that anyone who steps into it understands they're entering something sacred. You're not asking someone to love you, you're showing them what it looks like when someone already does, because you've started with yourself. This doesn't mean you won't want love. It means you won't need it to define you. You'll crave connection, yes, but you won't collapse without it. You won't bend your values, shrink your light, or silence your needs to keep it. You'll love from overflow, not from emptiness, and from that place you'll attract someone who sees you clearly, not as someone to fix or save, but as someone to build with, because they'll sense that you've done the inner work, that you've stopped settling, that you've already become the person you were always meant to be, with or without them. So stop begging for crumbs when you were made for a feast. Stop shrinking your needs for the comfort of being chosen. Start rising into the version of you that isn't afraid to be alone, because she knows her power multiplies in solitude. That woman doesn't beg for love, she is love, and because of that, she becomes unforgettable. Not because she begged for someone to return, but because she became the kind of person they never should have walked away from in the first place. This journey isn't about revenge. It's not about manipulating someone into returning. It's about releasing the habits that have been keeping you stuck and taking your power back, quietly, fully, unapologetically. The truth is, the version of you who begged, chased, overthought, and overextended herself was doing the best she could with the love she was taught to give. But now you're learning to give that love to yourself. That is where the real transformation begins, not when he returns, but when you return to your center. Each key shift in this speech is a turning point. When you stop chasing and start creating space, you allow the relationship to breathe and the truth to rise. When you stop justifying his behavior and making excuses for red flags, you begin to trust your intuition again. When you stop over-texting and start observing instead, you learn the difference between attention and intention. And when you pull your energy inward into your purpose, your growth, your healing, you stop needing love to complete you because you realize it was never outside of you to begin with. You don't have to prove your worth to be loved. You don't have to chase someone to be chosen. You only need to embody the truth of who you are, worthy, enough, and powerful without conditions. When you rise in that truth, the people who are meant to be in your life will meet you there. Not because you demanded it, but because you became it, and those who can't rise with you, let them fall away with grace. You are no longer shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You're expanding into your own destiny. What you stop doing matters just as much as what you start. You stop begging and you start receiving. You stop waiting and you start moving. You stop explaining and you start expressing. That shift sends a new message to the universe and to anyone who ever took your love for granted. I am no longer accessible to anything that doesn't align with my peace. That's the energy that gets noticed. That's the vibration that gets felt. And yes, that is when they come back. But the best part, by then, you'll be in such a solid place that you'll only accept them back if they return ready. Ready to grow, ready to show up, and ready to meet the version of you who no longer settles. Because the truth is, you didn't lose him, you found you, and if you keep honoring that, you'll attract a love that doesn't need chasing, a love that's real, a love that stays, but most important, you'll live with yourself in a way that feels peaceful, grounded, and whole. That is the real win, that is the return, and that is the moment you finally stop breaking for love and start rising in it. Thank you for listening with an open heart and the courage to face what many are afraid to admit. If this message hit home for you, let it be your reminder that you are not broken, you are becoming. Every step you take to stop chasing what isn't chasing you is a step back toward the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. You deserve a love that doesn't require you to beg, perform, or wait in silence. You deserve peace, clarity, and someone who sees you without needing to lose you first. And until that arrives, you have the power to become everything you were always meant to be. Stay strong, stay grounded, stay rising. Thank you for being here. Until next time, take care of your heart and never forget what it's worth. Goodbye for now.